My dear friends, as you sit here by the fire, I'm going to share with you the story of a legend who lived far away in a different land. A man who led an entire nation, a warrior without a sword. A quiet storm. His name is Mahatma Gandhi. But hold on, we'll discover together that he was more than just a name. He changed the world step by step. Gandhi was born in 1869 in a small town called Porbandar. In the sweltering heat of India, his family was ordinary. But a child doesn't need grand roots to change the world, does he? His father, Karamchand Gandhi, was a government official, kind of like the local ruler of that little town. And his mother? She was someone special. Putli Bai Gandhi was the woman who shaped Gandhi's spirit. She was devout, simple, and always compassionate. The deep spiritual world that influenced Gandhi throughout his life was a gift from his mother. And this faith, this patience would become his strongest weapon. Young Gandhi was not like other kids, wise friends. Even as a child, he was different. While other kids played, he would dive into the mysteries of nature. He could spend hours watching how birds flew and how trees danced in the wind. In vast India, even as a tiny child, he never stopped pondering big questions. War or peace? Power or patience? Over time, these questions transformed into a profound chain of thought that would determine Gandhi's destiny. Now, dear friends, think about it. If a child is more interested in nature, people, and the universe than in playing with friends, there's something significant hidden in their future. Gandhi's childhood in that tiny town was the first step toward his transformation into a great revolutionary. But this journey was just beginning. He would change not only his own life, but also the fate of an entire nation and even the world. Now, let me tell you about the first sparks of this journey. Yes, dear listeners, brace yourselves, for Mahatma Gandhi's life holds much more than an ordinary existence. Get ready to meet a revolutionary who roared in silence. My dear friends, let's travel back to the year 1869 when Gandhi took his first steps. Picture this, a small town called Porbandar on the western coast of India, overlooking the Arabian Sea. It's right here, in this very place, that the seeds of a legend began to sprout. Gandhi, known by his full name Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, opened his eyes to the world on October 2nd, 1869. His family wasn't from a grand dynasty or a wealthy lineage, but within the walls of the home where Gandhi grew up lay a whole world. His father, Karamchand Gandhi, was the town's Diwan, a sort of administrator for Porbandar. He was a man involved in politics, calm yet authoritative, always contemplating state affairs. But it was Gandhi's mother, Putli Bai Gandhi, who truly shaped his spirit. Putli Bai was a simple woman with deep religious devotion. Raised in Jainism, her life philosophy revolved around nonviolence and respect for all living beings. It was these teachings that molded Gandhi's soul. Even as a small child, he grew up surrounded by his mother's prayers, witnessing her fasting and rituals. Her quiet strength imprinted on him, laying the foundations of patience and nonviolence for his future great struggle. At that time, Gandhi was just a little boy, yet his mind was already preoccupied with big questions. He would watch the other kids playing outside, but his playground was different. He would immerse himself in nature, observing how the wind carried the leaves and how the birds soared through the sky. Everything around him whispered meaning. Even back then, he was seeking balance and tranquility in life. This quest would ignite the spark that would transform him into a revolutionary who would challenge the world. As young Mohandas walked through the warm streets of Porbandar, no one could predict what kind of man he would become. But he was destined to carry the legacy passed down from his family. And with it, he would inspire an entire nation. His father's political experience and his mother's spiritual depth would shape Gandhi's character, gifting him both intellect and serenity. Dear friends, the land where Gandhi was born and the values his family instilled in him became the strongest weapons in his future struggle. Just think, who would have imagined that a child growing up in a small town, cradled in the loving, faith-filled arms of his family, would one day change the course of the world. This is how Gandhi's story began, quietly, simply, but profoundly. And this tale would stretch all the way to his nonviolent resistance, his great marches, and the fight for India's independence. Gandhi's birth was not just the arrival of one person, it marked the rebirth of a nation. Now we come to that critical period in young Gandhi's life. At just 20 years old, in 1888, this young man, witnessing the whirlwind of social transformations in India, set out on a grand adventure. His destination, London, which at the time was considered one of the centers of the world, shrouded in mist. Yes, Gandhi decided to go to England to study law. But this journey wouldn't just be about hitting the books. It would be his first serious encounter with Western civilization and the beginning of a deep introspection within his soul. Imagine, dear friends, leaving the warm lands of India, filled with mystical beliefs, and stepping into a completely different culture, the vast, complex, modern world of Europe. From a young age, Gandhi had been molded by his mother's teachings, and now he found himself in an entirely new reality. Walking the cobblestone streets of London, surrounded by people rushing about in a world shaped by Western rationality and coolness, Gandhi felt his roots more deeply than ever before. Yet, he was also filled with curiosity about this new culture and way of life. When he first arrived in London, he felt so strange and out of place. The grand buildings, heavy traffic, and crowds felt like stepping into another universe. But Gandhi had a deep thirst for learning. As he started his law studies in London, even while he was buried in textbooks, his eyes were constantly scanning the environment. For him, law wasn't just about rules. He wanted to understand the quest for justice underlying it. He questioned how ordinary people found justice, not just the wealthy and powerful. Alongside this, a conflict arose within Gandhi, yearning for a synthesis of Eastern and Western philosophies. While the disciplined way of thinking in the West fascinated him, the calm, simple wisdom of the East wrestled with the complexities of this new world in his soul. But these years were also pivotal in shaping Gandhi's character. Life in London taught him the importance of personal discipline, hard work, and above all, staying true to his beliefs. At one point, he even tried to emulate the Western lifestyle, wearing their clothes and adopting their eating habits. Yet with every attempt, a voice from deep within him warned, "Don't forget who you are." This voice pushed him to cling even tighter to his Hindu beliefs, vegetarianism, and the spiritual values of India. The personal quest he experienced during those days began laying the groundwork for his future philosophy of nonviolent resistance. During his years in London, Gandhi not only studied law but also observed the Western mindset, how society functioned, and how politics operated. He read countless books in libraries, met thinkers, and participated in discussions. He saw the Western pursuit of individualism and freedom, but also the injustices brought by industrial capitalism. These observations sparked a profound transformation in Gandhi's mind. He realized he needed to find a balance between what he learned from the West and the teachings of the East. By 1889, this young man inside Gandhi had come to know London better, equipped with a wealth of knowledge blended with the rich cultural heritage of the West. Yet every moment spent in these lands didn't sever his roots. Instead, it strengthened his connection to his identity. By 1891, he was preparing to return to India, having successfully completed his law studies. But the Gandhi who returned to India was not the same young Mohandas who had arrived in London. He was now someone who carried the wisdom of both the West and the East, standing at the beginning of a profound journey. And so, dear friends, this journey would lead Gandhi into a greater struggle, onto the revolutionary path he had dedicated himself to for his people. Those years spent in London left deep marks on his life and laid the foundation for his future achievements. Gandhi was returning to India not just as a lawyer, but as a guide committed to transforming the human spirit and society. Now, dear friends, we arrive at a turning point in young Gandhi's life. It was 1893. Gandhi decided to embark on a completely new adventure to carve out his path in the field of law, South Africa. He set out to work as a lawyer in this distant land, but little did he know that this journey would not only mark the beginning of his professional life, but also the start of a struggle that would inscribe his name in history in golden letters. When Gandhi stepped foot in South Africa, he found not only the cold face of the law, but also a world steeped in deep injustice. In those lands, there was horrific racism and discrimination, particularly against Indian origin immigrants. The incident on the train, where he was forcibly removed and humiliated, despite having a first-class ticket just because of the color of his skin. This event stirred a storm in Gandhi's mind. This young man, who had received years of legal education and was raised in one of the centers of civilization, London, suddenly found himself questioning his debt to his roots, his people, and justice itself. But rather than becoming angry, Gandhi began to reflect. For him, justice wasn't just about individual rights, it was a moral law that spoke to every layer of society. With this mindset, Gandhi followed his deep inner moral compass and developed a new concept, satyagraha. This was a concept, dear friends, that expressed not only physical resistance but also a spiritual struggle. Satya meaning truth and agraha meaning firmness. Satyagraha was a passive resistance based on truth, but it was never about surrender. On the contrary, it meant resisting firmly and non-violently with an unshakable belief in the truth. When Gandhi first put this concept into practice in South Africa, no one realized he was sowing the seeds of a great revolution. During his years in South Africa, Gandhi united the Indian community against racist laws. At that time, the system under white supremacy regarded Indian origin immigrants as second-class citizens, denying them even the most basic rights. Gandhi gathered these people and encouraged them. But dear friends, Gandhi's courage wasn't just unique to him. He believed in the power and unity of the people. He saw that for individuals to defend their rights, they first needed to trust one another. Over the years, he was arrested numerous times, faced trials in courts, and was even imprisoned. But whenever he appeared in court to defend himself, he was defending the truth. His nonviolent resistance was something that the authorities of the time found incomprehensible. They believed that power was solely about weapons and oppression. But Gandhi knew that true power lay within a person, in their conscience. And in this direction, no matter how much pressure he faced, he continued to defend the truth without resorting to violence. The Satyagraha movement resonated widely in South Africa. The Indian community gathered around this movement, organizing marches under Gandhi's leadership, conducting boycotts, and demonstrating passive resistance against the laws. This movement Gandhi initiated in South Africa was a precursor to the great struggle in India. Gandhi was no longer just a lawyer. He had become a wise figure, awakening the spirit of the people, walking the path of justice and truth. These years Gandhi spent in South Africa were among the most significant turning points in his life. The idea of Satyagraha would become not just a beacon of hope for Indians in South Africa, but also the most powerful symbol of nonviolent resistance worldwide. The experiences he gained and the thoughts he developed in these lands would later become his most important weapon in India's struggle for independence. South Africa had ignited the revolutionary spirit within Gandhi, and this fire would illuminate the world. So, dear friends, the quiet yet powerful resistance Gandhi initiated in South Africa laid the foundation for future great struggles. With his belief that it would be truth and patience that triumphed over violence, he became a leader who took root in the hearts of millions, and he was just at the beginning of his journey. Dear friends, the spirit of resistance ignited by Gandhi in South Africa brought him back to his homeland as the calendar turned to 1915. India was trapped in the clutches of British colonial rule, and its people were writhing in despair. Gandhi was no longer just a lawyer. He had become a man devoted to defending the rights of his people, a sage fighting for justice and peace. His years in South Africa had not only taught him the power of passive resistance, but had also fostered a deep understanding of his people's suffering. When he set foot in India, he knew he would initiate a struggle for freedom here, just as he had in South Africa. Upon his return to India, Gandhi quickly earned the love and respect of the people. But this was not something easily achieved. Centuries of colonial rule had drained the people's confidence and spirit of resistance, leaving them in a state of hopelessness. The British had exploited India's resources with their powerful industrial machinery, weakening agriculture and collapsing the economy. The people were struggling in poverty, deprived of even the most basic rights. Yet Gandhi saw the fear ingrained in the hearts of the people. He understood that breaking this fear would require not just a physical struggle, but also a spiritual resistance. Before launching a fight against the British, Gandhi realized he needed to understand his people and earn their trust. He positioned himself not merely as a leader, but as a part of the community, a guide standing alongside them. He began to travel through the villages and towns of India. He listened to the people's grievances, witnessed the traces of poverty, exploitation, and despair with his own eyes. Standing alongside them like a wise elder, he conveyed that a better future was possible. However, while giving hope to the people, he was also honest with them. He told them that the struggle would be long and difficult, but it could be achieved patiently and without violence. During this process, Gandhi began to transform the philosophy of ahimsa, or non-violence, into a mass movement in India for the first time. Like Satyagraha, his philosophy encompassed not only physical resistance but also spiritual resilience. Gandhi taught his people not only to oppose British rule but also to overcome the fear, despair, and insecurity within themselves. This philosophy made his leadership unique in the eyes of the people. He was not just a politician, he was a guide who spoke to the conscience of the nation. With his return to India, Gandhi initiated the first serious resistance movements against British rule. At that time, India needed a stance against the economic exploitation by the British. The British forced Indian farmers to cultivate crops like indigo, which served only their interests, further impoverishing the people. It was at this point that Gandhi rushed to the aid of the farmers in the Champaran region. The movement he initiated against the British oppression in Champaran became Gandhi's first major resistance in India. He defended the rights of the farmers against British agricultural exploitation and gained their support. This established Gandhi as a hero in the eyes of the people. The first independence movements in India were not limited to the victory in Champaran. Gandhi also supported the farmers in the Kadai region against the British's unjust tax policies. Despite adverse weather conditions and low crop yields, the British demanded heavy taxes from the farmers. Gandhi organized the resistance of the farmers in this region and negotiated with the British authorities to protect their rights. Ultimately, he succeeded in securing the rights of the people. This struggle in Kadai further solidified Gandhi's status as a leader among the populace. He was no longer just a local hero, he had become a symbol of resistance across the nation. Friends, during this period, Gandhi became a beacon of hope spreading throughout every corner of India. He was not only fighting against British rule, but also against the fears and despair within the hearts of the people. In this struggle, Gandhi sowed the seeds of faith in the hearts of the people. For him, freedom was not just a physical concept, but a spiritual awakening, and the people of India were now ready for this awakening. Gandhi's return to India lit the fuse of the independence movement. There was now resistance against the British, but this resistance would be carried out not with weapons, but with conscience. The deep connection Gandhi forged with the people marked the first steps of the long journey that would lead India to freedom under his leadership, and these steps would forever change the course of Indian history. Ah, dear friends, now I will tell you the story of the first major resistances that changed the fate of India. Shortly after Gandhi's return to India, a great test awaited him. Champaran and Kheda, these two small towns, were in fact the heart of India. Here Gandhi faced the deepest pains of his people and stood tall beside them, demonstrating what it meant to not succumb to oppression. Champaran was perhaps one of the harshest places where the ruthless face of British colonial rule was most evident. This was an agricultural region. The farmers' lives depended on the products they harvested from their lands. However, the British forced the villagers of Champaran to cultivate specific crops, particularly indigo. This plant was essential for the British textile industry, but it did not meet the needs of the farmers. Furthermore, the villagers were obliged to sell a significant portion of what they produced to the British. No matter how hard they worked, the money they earned was insufficient, leading them into a quagmire of debt and despair. It was at this point that Gandhi came to the aid of the farmers in Champaran. When Gandhi arrived in Champaran, he spoke at length with the farmers. He listened to their lives and their struggles. He witnessed their suffering with his own eyes and felt this pain in his heart. He stood beside them not as a leader, but as a friend. Yet Gandhi did not merely offer them consolation. He provided them with something greater, hope. He showed them that it was possible to gain their rights through peaceful resistance, without violence. Gandhi called on the people to avoid violence, but to be resolute. He taught them to not submit to British rule. Under his leadership, the villagers initiated a peaceful protest against the forced cultivation of indigo. The British officials were taken aback by this development, as they never expected such resistance. Friends, this movement in Champaran became a turning point for India. Under Gandhi's leadership, the farmers' resistance resulted in victory. The British were forced to retreat, and the villagers secured their rights. This was not only a victory, but also a great source of hope for India's future struggles. Under Gandhi's leadership, the people began to see the power of nonviolent resistance. This marked the first major success in India's quest for independence. However, Gandhi's struggle did not end with Champaran. Next came Kadai. Here too, a similar painful picture emerged. Farmers who could not harvest due to drought were crushed under heavy taxes. Despite natural disasters and economic hardships, the British demanded high taxes from the farmers. At that time, hunger was rampant in India, and people struggled to meet even their most basic needs. Gandhi came once again to the aid of the farmers in the Kadai region. Just as he did in Champaran, Gandhi listened to the people's grievances in Kheda and stood by them. He once again called for peaceful resistance to end the economic oppression faced by the farmers. Gandhi encouraged the farmers to refuse to pay taxes to the British. He wanted this resistance to be conducted with determination, not violence. He advised his people to refuse to pay taxes, but to never resort to violence. The British administration attempted to take harsh measures against this boycott. They thought that arresting Gandhi would halt the resistance. But dear friends, what Gandhi taught was precisely this. One person can be imprisoned, but an idea can never be confined to a prison. Gandhi's arrest emboldened the people even more. They continued their peaceful resistance, and ultimately the British were once again forced to retreat. The tax demands were reduced, and the farmers regained their rights. The victories in Champaran and Kheda were not merely local successes. Gandhi's philosophy of non-violent resistance echoed throughout India. The people began to realize their own power. The bond Gandhi formed with the people laid the foundation for a significant popular movement against British colonial rule. These resistances marked the first steps on India's path to freedom, with Gandhi continuing to guide his people at the heart of this struggle. Ah, dear friends, the peaceful resistances in Champaran and Kheda demonstrated how powerful a people can be in their quest for justice. Gandhi was not only fighting the British, he was also battling the fears and despair of his own people. And in this struggle, Victory was not merely a physical triumph, but a spiritual one. This great lesson taught by Gandhi left a deep imprint on the heart and soul of India. Thus began India's freedom struggle with patience and determination, just as Gandhi envisioned. Let us return to those tumultuous years in India, the 1920s. Imagine the simmering anger within a nation under British colonial rule, the accumulated pain of centuries, and rising amidst this anguish is a man, Mahatma Gandhi. But he is not an ordinary leader. Gandhi is not a commander wielding weapons. Instead, he is a sage armed only with faith and silent resistance. Between 1920 and 1922, the flames of the Indian independence movement began to burn fiercely for the first time. Gandhi took the helm of the Indian National Congress, pledging to lead his people to independence through peaceful means. But was it easy to stand against a colonial giant, one of the world's most powerful empires, especially without resorting to violence? This is where Gandhi's brilliance shone through. He taught his people not to take up arms against the British, but to disregard them altogether. How? Through boycotts. Gandhi's first major initiative was to boycott British goods. The British economic exploitation of India had ensnared not only the land but also the pockets of its people. Gandhi proclaimed, "If we do not wear British cloth, we will not enrich them." Thus, in every corner of India, people returned to their own weavings and labor. A great fire was ignited against British fabrics. When people burned their British goods, it was not just cloth that was consumed. A spark of hope was born within the populace. Gandhi traveled to villages and towns, encouraging the use of handlooms. Produce your own cloth, he urged. This is the first step toward freedom. But this was not merely an economic maneuver. Gandhi's boycott strategy aimed to undermine the British's spiritual hold over India as well. Boycotting British goods, institutions, and especially the education system was a pathway for India to break free from British influence. The people were liberating themselves from the yoke of a foreign culture. Gandhi's peaceful yet powerful resistance began to shake the British grip on India. Of course, every revolution has its price. The boycotts led by Gandhi brought significant hardships, not just to the British but also to the Indian people. For a long time, they had to rely solely on their own products. This meant great sacrifice for many. However, the message of peaceful resistance that Gandhi preached spread far and wide across India. Women, men, young and old, everyone became part of this struggle. The British, in their attempt to suppress these boycotts, resorted to every means possible. Oppressions, arrests, attacks, yet Gandhi's message had already taken root. The power of peaceful resistance stood firm against British oppression. The people responded not with violence but with a silent scream of defiance. And thus the movement led by Gandhi became a turning point in India's struggle for independence. During this period from 1920 to 1922, the activity of the Indian National Congress reached its zenith. Gandhi encouraged his people not only to gain independence from the British but also to believe in their own strength. His leadership transformed the Indian National Congress into a genuine people's movement. Gandhi became not just a political leader but also a spiritual guide. He awakened the conscience of India. Thus, the boycott of British goods became one of the most significant milestones in India's peaceful resistance. Gandhi's philosophy was clear. Violence would not bring true victory. His victory was about a people regaining their self-confidence. It was about winning this struggle through silent resistance against another power's exploitation. And so, through this peaceful resistance, India took its first steps on the path to independence. The movement that began under Gandhi's leadership inspired not only India but also independence struggles across the globe. The Salt March. It was March 1930. And did you know there was a ban on salt in India? Yes, salt. This simple yet vital substance of daily life had become a symbol for the people of India. The British had monopolized salt production and sales in India, forbidding the people even from making salt on their own land. And this is where Gandhi stepped in. Though it may have seemed a trivial matter, salt represented the essence of freedom for the people. Gandhi envisioned a movement that would not only protest this law, but also unite the people of India. And so, one fateful morning, Gandhi set out from the Sabarmati ashram in Gujarat, accompanied by 78 loyal followers. This 390-kilometer march would resonate across the entirety of India. Those steps, slow yet resolute, each step became a symbol of resistance against British oppression. Like a swelling tide, more and more people joined Gandhi in every village and town. What began with just a handful of individuals transformed into a river of humanity, flowing with thousands. Some elderly men walked with their canes, while young people shone with hopeful glimmers in their eyes as they marched alongside Gandhi. Everyone yearned to be part of this journey, knowing that this was not merely a salt march but a call emerging from the heart of India's quest for freedom. Finally, in April, they reached the sea. Before the eyes of the people, Gandhi bent down and picked up a handful of salt from the ocean. This simple act became one of the most iconic moments in world history. It was not just a handful of salt, it was a slap against British colonialism, a banner rising in the struggle for India's independence. Gandhi's action reverberated throughout India. People began producing their own salt, and in a desperate attempt to quell this grassroots movement, the British arrested thousands. Yet with every arrest, the people's resolve grew stronger. The Salt March not only stirred India but also resonated around the world. Gandhi's peaceful resistance garnered support from all corners of the globe. The media plastered headlines about this legendary march and the ensuing popular movement. Gandhi's message was clear: the path to resisting injustice was not through violence but through unity and steadfastness. And this march went down in history as a significant milestone on the road to India's independence. Yes, my friends, those steps echoed not just along dusty roads but within the hearts of the people. The Salt March heralded one of the greatest victories on the path to freedom. Gandhi's peaceful resistance changed the fate of India and inspired millions worldwide, and so it was inscribed in the annals of history in golden letters. Gandhi's years in prison. These were days that tested the faith of a leader who paid the heaviest price for freedom. Starting in the 1930s, the British began trying various ways to suppress Gandhi, the leader of this peaceful yet powerful resistance. And do you know what they did? They imprisoned him repeatedly. But for Gandhi, being behind bars was, in fact, another form of resistance. Those years in prison would become a symbol of his character and determination. They were not just a story of physical captivity, but also of mental liberation. When he was first imprisoned in 1922, the British thought they could silence him. But they were mistaken. For Gandhi, prison became a center of thought. He wrote letters to his comrades, developed strategies to keep the spirit of resistance alive, and used this time to discipline himself further. Prison strengthened Gandhi's resolve because for him, this struggle was not merely about political victory. It was about awakening the spirit of the Indian people and teaching them the power of peace and resistance. However, the most notable moments of his prison years were his hunger strikes. As the British continued to throw him in jail, Gandhi's responses grew stronger and deeper. A hunger strike, using one's body as a weapon. But what kind of weapon? A peaceful one, devoid of violence, uplifting the human spirit. This method deeply affected the people of India. Hunger strikes were not merely signs of physical weakness. Instead, these acts became symbols reflecting his moral strength, faith, and determination. The hunger strike he initiated in 1932 profoundly shook Indian society. The British feared that Gandhi's strike could lead to his death, for they knew his demise could ignite a rebellion in India. Gandhi, however, wanted to convey a message to his people and the world: the will of a people, no matter how oppressed, can never be defeated. With each passing day he grew weaker, but his spirit grew stronger. The people did not remain silent in the face of his steadfastness. Respect for his peaceful resistance spread throughout every corner of India. People prayed, their hopeful eyes watching for him to survive. Ultimately, the British were forced to retreat. Gandhi had become not just a leader but a figure embodying the spirit of India. As the people watched his body weaken, they grew more united behind the path he had shown them. The hunger strikes marked another turning point in Gandhi's strategy of peaceful resistance. Can a person use their body as a weapon against oppression? Yes, Gandhi proved this time and again. His hunger strikes resonated not just in India but around the world. Many witnessed his sacrifice and deep faith in peace. These hunger strikes once again demonstrated that violence is unnecessary in the struggle for freedom. Love and determination are the strongest weapons. Gandhi's years in prison were the years he was born as a leader and immortalized in the eyes of his people. For neither iron bars nor hunger could break his will. The year 1947, a monumental moment that changed the fate of India, steering the course of history in an entirely different direction. But dear listeners, this independence did not come easily. Thanks to Gandhi and his peaceful resistance, the British finally decided to withdraw from India. Yet this withdrawal was not a triumphant victory filled with celebrations for the people of India. There was on one side the joy of independence and on the other, an undercurrent of pain and tragedy. For India's independence also brought about a division, the birth of India and Pakistan. This partition would sadly become one of the bloodiest and most tragic events in history. Let me take you deep into those times. Gandhi stood on the brink of the peace he had fought for all his life. The British were finally willing to leave India. However, tensions within the country, especially the conflicts between Hindus and Muslims, were escalating with each passing day. Gandhi believed in the unity of these lands as much as he believed in India's independence. His dream was for a country where different religions and cultures could coexist peacefully. Yet, this dream was on the verge of shattering. For in the Indian subcontinent, a deep divide had begun to grow between Muslims and Hindus. This separation gave rise to the idea of Pakistan. For Muslims, a separate state was a guarantee. Hindus, however, were against this division. Before Gandhi's very eyes, India was split in two. As Pakistan was established as a new homeland for Muslims, India remained predominantly a Hindu state. This division was not merely a geographical separation, it was a fragmentation of hearts. Millions of people were uprooted. Muslims moved from India to Pakistan, while Hindus journeyed from Pakistan to India. Trains were filled with people heading to their new countries, and the violence and chaos experienced during this migration were beyond description. Homes were destroyed, families torn apart, and friends became enemies. Blood flowed, and tears of anguish turned into a flood. Yet Gandhi resisted this division with all his might. This great leader, who had devoted his life to his country, felt profound sorrow over the partition of India. He always believed in unity. However, events had spiraled out of control. The Hindu-Muslim conflicts had reached a point where even Gandhi's calls for peace were sometimes ignored. But what did he do? Gandhi refused to participate in the celebrations of independence. While other leaders joyously welcomed the establishment of the new India, Gandhi dedicated himself to the streets, striving to halt the Hindu-Muslim clashes. Walking and engaging in hunger strikes, he endeavored to sow seeds of peace and tolerance in people's minds. "This land belongs to all of us," he proclaimed. "It should be humanity that binds us together, not religion, identity, or origin." However, the tragedy continued. Independence and partition resulted in the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people. As Gandhi witnessed this ruthless reality, his heart grew heavier. Yet he did not stop. He continued to fight for nonviolence and tolerance. He had fought for years to lead a people to independence, to gift them freedom. But that freedom came with a great tragedy. Alongside the joy of India gaining its independence, Gandhi as a leader questioned himself in the shadow of partition and conflicts. For the price of this freedom had left a deep wound against his belief in peace. Remembering Gandhi's final days, the pain of those moments still weighs heavily on my heart. Imagine a man who devoted his entire life to advocating for nonviolence, striving to lead his people with peace, never taking up arms even while battling colonialism, yet, as he reached the end of his life, he unfortunately encountered violence. It was 1948, India was now independent, but that independence came with a bitter division. Gandhi's heart was heavy with sorrow over the partition of India. Throughout his life he had championed unity, yet hostility among his own people had deepened. He had distanced himself from the celebrations of independence, continuing to fight for peace until his last breath. He worked tirelessly to quell the conflicts between Hindus and Muslims, acting as an ambassador, traveling from village to village and city to city to calm the people, emphasizing the importance of living together. Dear listeners, despite the exhaustion in his aged body, Gandhi did not relent. Hunger strikes, calls for peace, mediations, but sadly, not everyone shared his vision. His peaceful rhetoric angered some extremist nationalist groups. And then that fateful day arrived. January 30th, 1948. Gandhi was preparing for his daily worship. That day, as he set out for his morning walk, dressed simply in his usual white cloth, he was headed to meet the people. But this time, a man approached from the crowd with the intent to take his life. This man was Nathuram Godse, a Hindu extremist. He accused Gandhi of betraying Hindus, finding fault with his efforts to foster peace between Hindus and Muslims, believing that in doing so, he jeopardized Hindu interests. Gandhi remained as innocent and defenseless as ever. That day, without a trace of anger, he faced his people with his customary love. But in that moment, a gunshot rang out. God stepped forward and fired his weapon. As the bullet struck his frail body, Gandhi's last words escaped his lips. "Hey Ram," meaning, "Oh God." The anguish of that moment, this noble man, who had rejected violence throughout his life, met his end through it. India had lost its father. When news of Gandhi's death spread, a wave of shock swept across the nation. People poured into the streets, tears streaming down their faces. No one could believe that such a great messenger of peace would meet such a tragic end. Mourning rose from every corner of India. This was not just the death of a leader, it was as if a piece of India's conscience had been torn away. Consider that, in all the difficult struggles against the British, Gandhi always had a way: nonviolent resistance, love, and peace. Yet, tragically, the hostilities within India had made him a target. The divide between Hindus and Muslims had shattered not only geography but also the hearts of the people. Gandhi became a victim of this partition. Protests erupted across the country following the assassination, and the people rose in outrage. For a brief period, the nation forgot its unity, mourning this great tragedy. The people of India had lost their beloved Bapu, or father. The world was not indifferent to this profound loss. Gandhi's death elicited deep sorrow not only in India but around the globe. He was not only a national leader of India but a symbol of peace worldwide. From England to America, from Africa to Asia, leaders and peoples mourned the passing of this great pacifist. The assassination of Gandhi was considered one of the greatest tragedies in the history of peaceful struggles. However, dear listeners, Gandhi's death did not signify the end of his ideas and struggle. On the contrary, his legacy of non-violent resistance and love for humanity only grew stronger. Gandhi's funeral became one of the largest ceremonies in Indian history. Millions accompanied him on his final journey. People from all walks of life and all religions came together. Hindus, Muslims, Christians, all gathered for the ideals of peace and brotherhood for which Gandhi had fought. That day, India witnessed once again the value of the unity that Gandhi had championed throughout his life. Yet tragically, this unity was very brief. Even after Gandhi's death, the tensions in the country continued, and the strains between India and Pakistan persisted. His legacy became a beacon of hope for many, but that light could not bring about lasting peace. Lastly, it is essential to remember, Gandhi was not just a man. He was a symbol of an idea, a movement, a resistance. He became an immortal representative of peace, love for humanity, and non-violence in history. His thoughts and teachings continue to live on in many parts of India and the world. Gandhi's death perhaps marked the end of an era, but it also signaled the birth of a new peace movement. The power of non-violence became etched in the annals of human history as his legacy. Ah, yes. Gandhi's philosophy of passive resistance left a legacy that shook not only India but the entire world. Just think about it, for hundreds of years, power was shaped through force, weapons, blood, and war. But Gandhi, he showed the world that there could be another way. One man brought a vast empire to its knees without resorting to violence, relying solely on his belief in justice. The roots of Gandhi's passive resistance run deep. The movement he initiated in India quickly transcended borders and resonated globally. Satyagraha, the power of truth, lies at the heart of Gandhi's teachings. According to him, a person's true strength was measured not by physical violence but by spiritual truth and patience. This principle made Gandhi an idol for freedom movements around the world. Nelson Mandela drew inspiration from Gandhi as he fought against apartheid in South Africa. Martin Luther King Jr. leaned on Gandhi's teachings while leading the struggle for civil rights in America. Imagine, even in the deep south of America, where people lived under discrimination and oppression, they found strength in the very methods of passive resistance that Gandhi had employed in India. This influence wasn't limited to freedom movements alone. Gandhi's teachings also impacted universal values such as human rights, environmental sustainability, and social justice. Today, many movements around the world that stand against injustice are grounded in Gandhi's principles. Although some may struggle to maintain patience with his philosophy of nonviolence, the path he illuminated has always been a guiding light. Gandhi's monumental legacy left a profound mark on world history. His name will forever be remembered as a symbol of peace, justice, and human rights. And thus, one man, through his words and steadfastness, changed the world. Passive resistance became Gandhi's greatest weapon and humanity's most significant legacy. Well, dear friends, we've come to the end of a long journey. Today we witnessed how an ordinary person can change the fate of a nation and inspire the world. Ah, Gandhi, he never lost the light of truth in his heart throughout his life. Even when storms raged and the world was engulfed in darkness, he remained calm and patient. He left us with a very important lesson. True strength lies not in weapons or violence, but in faith in justice, love, and truth. Think about it, the people of India, under oppression, were struggling for years in pain and despair. Yet Gandhi stepped onto the scene without a sword or an army. With nothing but a demand for peace and justice, he reignited the fire in the hearts of the people. And as you can see, That fire spread not just across India but throughout the world. A wise person once said, "History is the story of humanity." Gandhi's story is indeed a part of that humanity. He not only led India to independence, he taught us what peace, nonviolent struggle, and resistance truly mean. He helped us recognize the strength within each of us. Now, my friends, close your eyes and think about the moments in your life that deeply affected you, the injustices you faced, and the unfairness you've seen in the world. What if we followed Gandhi's path? Imagine if we embraced our truths with the same patience and determination, walking with love and justice. How different would our world be, right? Gandhi created a revolution. But this revolution was not fought on battlefields, it was won in hearts. Those who understood the power of nonviolence carry on his legacy every day. Today, each of us is part of this great inheritance. And dear listeners, this is where the story of one of history's most important figures comes to a close. But this story is not just Gandhi's, it's all of ours. Because when each of us acts with love, faith, and justice, we can create significant changes in the world. As Gandhi said, be the change you wish to see in the world. So my friends, we wrap up today's story here. But remember, in this great river of history, a new page can be opened at any moment. And each of us can be part of that page.